How do you avoid confusing which artifact? Now, hmm? Good evening. My name is Raymond Mattry. I'm here in the African American News Station with Kamar Kasifh of the Office of Public Education and Interpretation. Along with us also is another young man. Would you like to say your name, sir?
Yes. My name is Raymond Mattry II, and I want to know what the African American burial ground is.
The African Burial Ground.
Well,
Oh,
well, actually, Raymond B. Mattry II, the African burial ground is where Africans in colonial America were first buried for the 100 years between approximately 1712 and 1794. It's in Lower Manhattan, and it was discovered in 1991. And to this day, there are approximately 10 to 20,000 Africans buried under the ground in Lower Manhattan.
Okay, Mr. Kasifh. Why is the African Burial Ground so important?
Well, anything that helps fill in the gaps of the history of Africans in America is important. What a lot of people don't realize is that there was slavery in New York in the colonial period. People tend to think of slavery as a southern thing, but there were Africans in America up until and beyond this Revolutionary War who were enslaved in Africa, and the enslaved in America, in New York City in particular. And the African burial ground is evidence of that life of the African.
And how many human remains were found there?
Well, until Congress decreed there'd be ceasing of actual excavation, 390 remains were recovered. But as I said before, there are 10 to 20,000 Africans under the 5.5 to 6 acres that the burial ground actually encompasses.
And how deep below the ground level were these remains found?
Well, they were at different and varying levels, but the deepest was approximately 28 feet below the current ground level. Uh, there had been instances where they were as close to the current ground level as 3 feet approximately, but the deepest had been 28 feet. Earlier on in the early history of Manhattan, which was the land of hills, was a hilly and a hilly place. And as you might know from current New York, Manhattan in the lowest part were is a flat area. So these areas were filled in and approximately again 28 feet deep.
So you're saying that the African burial grounds in New York City were there during the colonial period of the 16 and 1700s.
Correct. Um, Actually, in 1697, Trinity Church in Lower Manhattan decreed that no persons who are not part of the Anglican Church would be buried in their churchyard any further. But that didn't just leave Africans out. That left out Jews. For instance, there's a Jews burying ground in Lower Manhattan as well. But after that decree, it is assumed that if the African burial ground had not already been in existence, its existence was furthered by that decree. And so, at about that point, the earliest actual date we have for use of the burial ground is 1712, but that leaves a time period of almost 20 years between Trinity's closing and 1712, where we must have been buried somewhere.
Why has the name been changed from the Negro burial ground to the African burial ground?
Well, it's good you pointed that out. Early records, maps from the 19th century did show that this was called the Negroes' Burying Ground. But our research has shown that Africans at that point in time called themselves Africans. They started organizations such as the African Methodist Episcopal Church, uh, the African Free School. They themselves knew who they were and where they were from, and they didn't accept that Negro name, and in deference to them, we won't either.
Okay. Um, it's strange because a thought just came across my mind of Were there any artifacts found?
There were many artifacts found. There were approximately 560 artifacts, although 500 of them were shroud pins. And these were similar to our present day safety pins because the bodies of the burials were buried with shrouds or sheet type garments on. And the shroud pins were used to keep them in place. But there were other artifacts such as buttons, articles of clothing, cufflinks, beads, waist girdle. Different things were found, and also in conjunction with the actual burial ground project, there was a Five Points excavation, which was a community whose descendants or ancestors probably were in the burial ground. In which case were found pottery, glasses, bones, food that people ate, for instance, chicken bones and things like that. All types of things you might find in a household.
Okay, now if the site has been officially closed by Congress, what will happen to the human remains once they are analyzed and the study is complete?
Well, we estimate the study should take at least 5 years to study the actual remains at Howard University under the direction of Dr. Michael Blakey. After that point, it the remains will be reinterred on the site, and Congress had previously allocated approximately $3 million to plan a memorial slash museum of some sort to honor both those buried in the burial ground and the contribution of Africans in colonial New York. So we expect again within after 5 year period for there to be a reinterment and a memorial at the site.
Okay, how will the public remain informed about the burial site, the remains, and the artifacts?
Well, that is where our office comes in. We are the Office of Public Education and Interpretation of the African Burial Ground. We do outreach in the sense of going around to different schools, jails, organizations, clubs, any people who want to know more, and we all should know one. We all should want to know more about the history of America and New York and Africans in that context. Our office is located at 6 World Trade Center, the U.S. Customs House, room 239. Our phone number is 212-432-5707. And you can contact us there. And you can either come by our office and we can make a presentation for your group. You can tour the lab that we have downstairs where they are conserving the artifacts, or we can come to your location and give you a slideshow and answer any questions you may have on the project.
For the school systems here in Nassau County that would like to know more information about the African burial ground, is it a problem for your office to come through the school systems of Nassau County and give a presentation?
We haven't encountered as yet any type of problems with dealing with different schools. Generally, what happens is a teacher may ask us to come forward, or a teacher may bring her class or his class down to our office. Often we've had several presentations in a particular school because several teachers have asked for it. It's probably too big of presentation, rather to teach or to present before a whole school like an auditorium setting. But for smaller, like 30, a group of 30, that's the ideal size, which is a class size. So no, if a teacher requests it, we come, and if they want us to come, we will come.
In your personal opinion, for say if the school system has African American studies as part of the curriculum, how important do you think that African Americans should know about their own culture? How important is that to an individual as far as disciplining him and preparing him for the world?
Well, I guess that's more of a personal question for me in the sense that I believe everyone should know more about themselves. Malcolm X had said that our personal memory is to us as individuals as our history is to us as a people. The history of the African burial ground and the significant impact of Africans in colonial New York, we in effect helped build what we now call New York. That tells a youngster as well as adults a lot about the ability of of our own abilities, and oftentimes we aren't told what we are capable of doing, and therefore believe we may not be able to do much. Everything and anything that we've done should be explored in the educational curriculum.
Okay, my last question for you today is what is happening at the site now?
Well, currently, the excavation site has been filled in with sterile soil. There's grass has been planted, and there's a fence around the site with a sign on the site indicating that it is the African burial ground. It's off limits, although there was a candlelight ceremony when the remains went to Howard University in conjunction with ceremony at Howard, where different Babalawe were allowed on the site to pour libation and give honor to the ancestors. But for general public, it's cordoned off because it is a sacred site, and we wish to honor the sacredness of that site.
Okay, Mr. Kasifh, for all of for the young brother here that's sitting here in our audience, and for the young African American male and female audience that we have viewing this program, what words of inspiration can you give them as far as understanding and learning their culture?
Well, I believe in reading. I'm a writer, and I do understand the power of words. And all that we learn in this particular project will be written down, but you can't read it and you can't know it unless you know how to read. First step is to take seriously the activity of reading, because that is, I think, a primary step in developing not only your own self-esteem, but in developing or helping move forward yourself as an individual, your people, and indeed humanity.
Okay, you're also a poet, am I correct?
Yes, yes, you are.
There are a couple of words of rhyme you would like to leave us with?
Well, thank you for that. Yes, I am a poet, and I try my best to put my ideas forward in a lyrical manner. I guess in conjunction with this burial ground project and this particular interview, I'll say this little short piece that I had written before is called "Create Yourself." If God is the creator, if God is love, if God is truth, then get in touch with God in you. Love yourself. Be true to yourself. Create yourself. Yes, create yourself. Thank you.
And we'd like to thank you. I'm Raymond Mattry, here with the African American News. Our guest this evening was Kamar Kasifh and Raymond Mattry II. We'd like to thank you for viewing us this week. Uh, See you.